Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna let Natasha be there and like, good evening, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? Maybe, yes? Okay, so I'm gonna call this meeting to order. It's 6:18. Thank you for being here with us. I first want to acknowledge that today is the first day of Passover. And in Judaism, this is a holiday that commemorates the Hebrew liberation from slavery from Egypt. And I know that this day was not convenient to everybody. We apologize. We're going to try to do better. It felt right in our calendar. And as we explained last fall, we're going to try to do better at looking at our calendar as we move forward. So sorry about that, but thank you for being here tonight. I'm excited about the conversations that we're hoping to have ahead. As we continue to develop a unified vision and make sense of the future together. And this continues to, do that groundwork for that continuing trust and collaboration for years to come. And we can all develop a shared understanding of what we want for all our students at Washington Central. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Megan.
Great. Thank you. So welcome, everyone. I'm also excited to kick off and start sharing some more detail about this process. And I'm in a second going to introduce Jeannie Phillips, our coach through this process. But I wanted to start by sharing a little bit about how we landed with working with Great Schools Partnership. So in the kind of November, December timeframe, we pulled together a group of people to say, what is it we're looking for in an organization that will help us through this process? Because as Flor said, this is about understanding what it is our communities want for our kids, and then how do we get there? And we had really specific thoughts about what we were looking for, put out a request for proposals, we got several back, and Great Schools, even through that process, was excellent at kind of shifting and, hey, can you think about this? And so we're really excited to be working with them. Jeannie's going to share a little bit more about them as an organization. We're going to share some things. We have some members of our steering committee here, although not all. So we'll share that with you. And then there will be time at the end to answer questions. So, here's Jeannie.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Jeannie Phillips. I've lived in Vermont. Am I speaking loud enough for you? Great. I've lived in Vermont for 23 years now. I moved first to Southern Vermont, Londonderry, Vermont, when my son was a newborn, and became a school librarian at Chester Andover Elementary School, and then moved up to Green Mountain Middle and High School, grades 7 to 12, also in Chester, Vermont. And before leaving that role to work at the University of Vermont for 5 years at the Tarrant Institute for Innovative Education, working largely with middle schools to better meet the needs of middle level learners. And then more recently, I've joined Great Schools Partnership as a senior associate, and I want to talk a little bit about what they do. They're based out of Portland, Maine. I still live in Vermont. I still get to live here in this beautiful state. So Great Schools is a nonprofit organization that supports schools and works to redesign public education in order to improve learning for all students. And we have some core tenets that are aligned with the work that you're doing. We work towards anti-racist, inclusive, and equitable practices, policies, and cultures. We are focused often on proficiency-based teaching and learning. We advocate for multiple and flexible pathways that promote deep learning as well as student voice and choice in their education. We believe in shared data-informed decision-making amongst educators, students, families, and community members. And building trusting relationships between students, families, and educators. And finally, we are advocates for professional learning groups for educators. A central part of the work we do is our definition. Oops, sorry, I'm jumping ahead. Our vision is about thriving schools and communities where every student is getting what they need in order to move towards a more equitable society. And our mission is to support, challenge, and collaborate with educators and communities to achieve educational excellence and equity. Equity is a word we hear a lot. And one of the reasons, oops, I'm stuck, sir.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Oh, there we go. One of the reasons I decided to work for grade schools is because of their definition of equity. It's the toothiest, most meaningful definition of equity I've seen in an organization like this. So at grade schools, we believe that educational equity means ensuring just outcomes for each student, raising historically marginalized voices, and challenging imbalances of power and privilege. Were there any questions about grade schools before I move on? So Megan alluded to your work here, and this language comes straight from the request for proposals, which is the purpose of this work is to engage in a multi-year visioning and strategic planning process with an emphasis on equity engagement in order to unify the school district around a common understanding of what our community believes all students should experience as they go through the educational system here. These are your words. And so we began this work in March, and our first step was to select steering committee members. And some of them are here. So I wondered if the steering committee members that are here want to briefly introduce themselves. Do you want to get us started, Flor?
Sure, I'll get it there. I'm Flor Diaz-Smith, and I'm part of the committee and chair of the board. And I'll pass it on to
me.
Art.
I'm Kari Bradley from Callis. I'm a board member.
I'm Eric Emerson, from East Montpelier, and a board member.
June.
I'm Julie Moore, I'm a community member from Middlesex. I'm Adrienne Ubita, a community member from Middlesex also.
Kat there, community member from Callis and Callis school principal.
I'm Jen Miller, I'm the curriculum director, and I'm also a Middlesex resident.
I'm Tawny Waterhouse. I'm a community member from Worcester.
I'm Stephen Bellinger. I'm a principal here at 32.
Thank you all for that. You can see there are other community members representing, we have a student and possibly a second student joining our committee. We have community partners, educators, teachers from different buildings.
There may be, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there may be on Zoom, some additional members. I don't know if
Oh.
you wanted to, because I did see,
Sarah, for the
Arlen.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you, Diane.
Diane, I appreciate you queuing us to do that.
Hi, I'm Arlen Brookley. I'm a community member from Callis, and I'm also a librarian and technology teacher at East Montpelier Elementary School.
Is Arlen the only one? Great, thank you for that. Our steering committee met for the first time last week and had our introductory meeting, and we're just getting started. And one of the things we talked about was the role of the steering committee. And their primary role is listening. At great schools, we believe in equitable community engagement and really reaching out, not just to the people who just show up anyway. You know, there are those people, some of you are in the room right now, and your voices are super important, but also making sure to hear from voices that maybe meetings like this are less convenient for, voices that we want to go out and hear them where they are. We want to give them an extra special invite because maybe they don't always feel included. And so it's important that we listen to those voices. And honestly, that listening, that process is also a product. It's a product of building trust and relationships with your community. And so that's an important part of the steering committee's job. Once they do this listening, they're going to have a lot of data. Another thing they're going to do is synthesize that data and information and make some drafts. And then go back and listen some more by soliciting feedback. How are we doing? Did we hear you well? Have we heard everything? What might we have missed? And revising after they solicit that feedback. And then continuing to be in connection, communicating with the community back and forth. And that communication is a two-way street. This is what we've heard so far, what else? This is what we've heard, we've revised it again, what else? And so that's their role through this process. It's going to be a lot of work, and I'm really grateful for all the ways they showed up already and will continue to do so. I'm always leaving a little space for you, but you seem to.
You covered it.
This is our timeline, and so we started in March with just seeing who was interested in being on the steering committee and thinking about representation on the steering committee, and then I'm gonna walk you through each of the phases. We'll end in January of 2024. And so phase one is we're just laying the groundwork. And the next job of the steering committee is to design for community engagement. So we are going to start designing community conversations where we take what we already know, your vision, the visioning work you've already done, and we take that out to the community and say, how does this land? What else is important? What else do you need us to know that it's important for the young people in your community, for this school, for all the schools in this district, and the things we want so that our young people can realize their hopes and dreams. And so once they've designed, we'll start facilitating those community conversations and collecting that feedback, listening, note-taking, gathering that data, and drafting a vision and core beliefs. It might be revising the vision you already have and getting to what's important in this community, and then making sure we heard them well by soliciting for feedback. So that's where we are right now. There's going to be other data besides, you're going to hear me say data and data, because every time I say it, it sounds wrong to me. So just apologies for me switching it up. I never know which way I say it. And so the other data we're going to use is your students right now are taking the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. That data is going to be really important. The local common assessment data, how your students are doing on a variety of assessments is going to be data we look at. And then in the coming weeks, myself and my colleague Kate Cardoki are going to be doing equity pulse checks in each of your buildings. And just a little explainer about what an equity pulse check is and what that process looks like. That definition of educational equity that I shared earlier, Great Schools has developed a bunch of indicators for what does that look like in schools when we're doing that well. And we have a tool that I'm going to bring to each of your schools and sit down with the staff, the educators in your building, and they're going to do a little personal reflection. Then they're going to get in small groups and build some consensus. And we're just going to get a sense of where are the strengths for each school and where are there opportunities for growth, and set some priorities. Doing that will help us gather some data. We'll have a sense of strengths and opportunities for growth, challenges in each of the buildings. It also is an opportunity for the administrators in that building to think about professional learning for next year, continuous improvement plans, and to use that data in that way too. So that'll, it's a seed that feeds many birds.
It's funny, the piece that I was going to add is what you said at the end. I think, one of the things that people have asked quite a bit along the way is how do you combine data and information about who we are with community perspective? And so I think this is a really important piece. And then I would just echo that we will receive this in real time, we meaning schools and administration, and be able to do something with it and react to it, which is a really nice thing. And this is a good conversation on the heels of our ed quality meeting, where we're also talking about how does the board look at data about our schools. So it's just nice to have these processes mesh.
In phase two, we'll be sort of getting to this more final version of what the vision and core beliefs are. And so things will start to gel a little bit at that topmost level. And then we'll start getting into smaller focus groups to draft some goals based on those beliefs and that vision. So what are our goals going to be? Now that we have all this data, what are we working towards? And again, we'll be soliciting feedback on those goals. So again, there will be this transparent process of, we think these are our goals. What do you think? Okay, now we think these are our goals. What do you think? By the end of summer, moving into the fall, we'll be moving towards action. And so as those goals start to gel up and get kind of more solid, we'll be starting to think about what are the action steps that go with those goals? How do we get really concrete about what these goals mean we're going to do in our buildings? And so we're going to be facilitating work groups. Again, these will be smaller groups, not huge community forums, but smaller groups, but they're going to differ than focus groups in that they're going to be a little targeted. So for example, a goal that has emerged in another district that I'm working with is wellness, student well-being and wellness. And if that is a goal that emerges here, we might think strategically as a committee about who's got really good information and knowledge and expertise about young people and wellness. And so we might target your health educators, the PE educators, counselors, both school counselors and counselors out in the community, other people in the community who do work on young people's well-being, physical, mental well-being. And those folks will come and help us get really into those action steps. This is what this looks like. And again, we'll solicit feedback. It'll be an iterative process of saying, okay, what did we miss? Okay, give us some feedback on this every step of the way.
The one thing I would add in both phase 2 and 3, you know, we've heard the question quite a bit around how does this process dovetail and inform conversations that we have to have as a system about how do we make all of these goals and visions happen for kids, and what does that mean about our structure? And it's in these 2 phases that we start to understand where it is that we're headed, which is the time that we then will also have those conversations. And I think that's important for 2 reasons. One, and this part you've probably heard me say before, we need to know where we're headed in order to know how to structure ourselves. That's really important. But the other reason, and this came up at our steering committee meeting, and I think it's really important, is that in this process, we hope we're also building trust in how we approach this work with our communities. And as we build that trust, we will hopefully have that trust will extend to how we're going to have to make some difficult decisions. And we're also going to learn about how we need to engage in our community, what worked, what didn't work, what were ways that solicited a lot of those voices we don't hear, what didn't work, and then how can we use those methods to communicate and engage about other things moving forward. So lots of folks have asked kind of where that work sits, and it is both parallel and integrated. And this starts to inform it in a more concrete way.
Phase 4 is really where we start to finalize those action steps and thus the whole plan, engaging in feedback too, so that by January 2024, you have a really solid strategic plan that has sort of a trail of transparency with the data from community conversations, from focus groups, from work groups all along the way, and those feedback sessions where we're soliciting feedback. And that plan informs your work going forward.
So we know that there's a lot of questions, and there may be questions on the screen. Before we jump to that, is there anything that anyone from the steering committee wants to add, or something we missed, or we didn't tell you we were going to ask you that, so it's okay if you don't have anything. But
I did recall a conversation we had in the steering committee, the first meeting, about vision. We already have a vision in place, and what does that mean as we engage in this process? Throw it away, as we what does it mean? That would be the question.
yeah, thank you for that. And we talked a lot about how it's frustrating to go through a process that feels like you're just doing it for the sake of doing it. Like, if we already have a mission, isn't that? And so I'm appreciative of this process that's designed to test that. Is that still what we want and believe for our kids? And maybe we're hearing from more people to inform that, but we are building off of it because we are doing good work in the system, and both things are true.
I would just add that I think that the design committee that starts designing those first community conversations is going to grapple with, like, how do we use this vision and other work that we've done to engage folks in the conversation about, okay, here's where we've been going. Is this still where we're going? And what else can we add? And so that'll be the work of the section of the design of the steering committee that wants to really design the agenda and the sort of those early convenings.
Sorry to interrupt, but I just got an email from someone who says that they're having a hard time accessing the Zoom. They're trying to link from the agenda and are waiting for the host to start the meeting message.
Oh, no. Because we have a lot of people that can,
There's a lot of people on,
there's a lot of people.
and I know I logged on from the agenda.
And I,
The link on a calendar
I'll just-
that we're using, I don't know if there's-
maybe it's that day we have a wrong link on the agenda. Arlen?
Yeah, I was gonna say I was using the one from the agenda, and I did just check, it's hard to tell because it's a tiny URL, but I did just check by copying it again, and it is an incorrect meeting. I got in because Alicia sent me the correct one, so.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
So,
So
Mark,
could you,
what's the meeting ID number?
Coming right up.
and you can send them from your calendar, Jonas?
That's what I'm gonna do. Just so I can burn stuff.
880
Yep.
6786.
Yep.
4540
That's it.
and the passcode.
Yep.
699253.
Is it possible to go
Sorry.
back to the steps? The phases?
Yeah,
Probably
would you
the
like
big one
to-
is the same one.
Yeah, and Diane, before we move into questions, I was wondering, because we have several of it's like Jeannie was saying, if you guys wanted to share your word at the end, I thought that was a great exercise of how are you feeling about this, so the people that are in the steering committee, if you don't mind sharing, if you remember, but it's like. It's like that, but
Just to be clear, I think what Floor's saying, at the end of a 2-hour meeting, we said, in 3 words or less, how are you feeling now about the work ahead? And I don't
I had more than one word. I always do. Hopeful and excited.
Okay. Yeah, and I think it's, it's helpful for people to, to know about it, and you don't have to, but if you feel like, I don't know, Jen, or sorry.
My word was ready.
then, yeah.
Complexity. I can't remember, but I'm sure it was something like excited and hopeful. Hearing this again is.
Sean?
My word was open-hearted.
Yeah.
I slept since then.
Adrian, do you remember?
Oh, she shared complexity.
Oh, complexity, that's
Yeah.
right.
Well, tonight, first 2 words in my head was so excited as well.
I do remember a couple people, and I think I was one of them, overwhelmed. So I think it's fair to say it's a big process. I'm equally excited, and it's hard work making sure we do this well. And that's part of, again, why I appreciate that it'll be iterative. We won't get it right the first time. We won't get the engagement right the first time, but we will learn a lot.
I would add that there's hiring great schools means that, yes, I'm the coach.
This meeting is being recorded.
I'm the coach on this, so I'm gonna be present a lot. Thank you for muting me. But we also have other folks we can leverage at Great Schools Partnership, including our Director of Research, Bryn Whitmer, who's going to be doing a lot of synthesizing of data. And we've already leveraged my colleague Gwen Merrick, who's done some of the graphic design of the phases and will be a part of the process going forward too, as well as other folks. Kate Cardoki, who's joining us for some work. She's super excited to be back in this district. She's done a little work with Stephen in the past and doing some of those equity pulse checks.
Great, so we can move into questions.
You have Arlen too.
Yeah, oh, Arlen, you want to share your work?
So I don't quite
Or
remember
words?
my word. I remember feeling excited and optimistic and also overwhelmed. But I did also want to say that one thing that I really appreciated about our first meeting was an acknowledgement of the work that we're taking on and the various ways that the members of the committee will be asked to engage with members of our community, like really looking at and recognizing that we all have different strengths and that we have a large group of people that we really need to involve in this, because everyone in that room, and I'm sure everyone in this room, either physical or virtually from Calais, hey, are here because we absolutely want the best educational system and opportunities for our kids. And there was a real focus on our students and what needs to happen to also balance the needs of a changing community. And I just felt that was really clear, and and I'm grateful to the facilitator. I felt like we really have the right person in the room, and I just wanted to say that. So thank you for including me in this, and Palace peeps, I'm here for you.
Thank you, Arlen.
This is a time for question.
Yeah.
So how do you know that you're getting enough community input through this process so that you can then represent that this is what the community wants for the students?
Yeah,
What's the criteria for that?
I really appreciate that question. I think the steering committee itself will grapple with what those criteria are. I think we've already started to think about who's on the steering committee and where are they from. And then one of the roles, Arlen just spoke of roles, not everybody's a facilitator. Not everybody's a writer, right? So there are a couple roles we sort of delineated as facilitator, designer, drafter, or writer, but we also delineated our community liaisons, the people who are in touch, who are culture brokers really with their communities, who can reach out and make sure that we're getting at those voices. I think the other way we're thinking about this, and this doesn't answer the question of criteria, but it answers the question of how we're going to engage in the work, is to not only do the work at schools, but to get out into communities and hold some of these meetings where people are, and at times where it's convenient for them and not just convenient for us as a committee. And then the final thing is we've already as a committee been leaning on some really well-researched and well-developed work through great schools on equitable community engagement. And what do we mean when we say equitable community engagement, which is different than sending out an email and listening to whoever shows up, but being really strategic about that. And so for my colleague Jose is one of those people whose expertise is in equitable community engagement. And so I'll lean on him too to help us think about what are the criteria? How do we know we're hearing from a broad enough cross-section of your community? And then our definition of educational equity says raising historically marginalized voices. And I think that's another thing we'll be thinking about is who do we typically not hear from and how do we get to hear from them?
Yeah, and I would add, part of, to me, it's a lot like universally designing something, and that's all, I think actually, for me, the word is less criteria and more all of the different access and entry points to the process. And then we are going to have to go back and look at that. What did we get from the survey version of feedback? What did we get from the focus group? How can we build off? One of the things the committee will do in this next phase is build off of the community mapping we did, which, picking that up again, that was good work, and we'll continue it. So it is a little bit like, here are the things research tells us about how we reached, and then how did we do? That's that recursive part. Is there one or more methods that didn't work? Jeannie also hinted, and I think actually, I don't remember who suggested it, someone added a role of the committee, which is sort of a networker, communicator type role to say, what did we miss? What, you know, so I think it's recursive. I think we'll have to double back probably. Yeah.
Can you have,
Oh, sorry.
no, I just wanted them to talk a little bit about the thought exchange platform that came out of too.
Can I just add to that discussion though, Chris, because that question did come up. And we said we would return to it at our next meeting. In terms of how are we gonna know if we're successful, both in terms of the process, do we get enough engagement that'll be widely supported by the community? And the content of the plan itself, is it gonna provide enough clarity to help us do what we need to do? And I would say, we're gonna think about it, but if anybody has input into that, we'd love your help, because it's not clear, right?
No,
It's hard.
Yeah, Flora reminded me, I'm not sure if people are familiar with the thought exchange platform that also came up as an idea. It's a survey, it's way more than a survey actually, but it's a online platform, pretty accessible to use, that creates affinity from comments. So a really broad question can be asked, and then the answers that come out of it, the program merges them, takes themes, and then it will like kind of put back out, here are the top 5 things that came out of that question, and then those become additional questions. And it's so it's another, again, universal design that's still not going to work for everyone. So there's that, there's in person, there's not in person, but virtual, there's small group, like, you know, people that aren't going to want to, you know, all the things.
Okay, thanks.
And then I'm assuming that, you know, we're 5 very different communities, so the community representation on the steering committee, as well as then making sure that we're gathering information and trusting that.
Yes, I would say the steering committee's job is to say what are the groups that we have to go out and figure out, and absolutely. Who's a focus group in and of themselves, who is a, things like that, so for sure.
I'm curious about channels of communication, and it feels like the innovation and sort of the guerrilla approach to community engagement is sort of the right tactic, but is there also sort of like a consistent channel of communication that people will be able to check in on progress? I think for some they'll have availability before summer, for some availability during summer. How can we check in on progress?
Yeah, so we've had a couple of thoughts. I actually kind of imagine that it'll be a subgroup of our group who focuses on communication by itself. But some of the things initially we've talked about, some are simple. We will have a section on our website that will be our strategic planning section. So that's just a clearinghouse. It's a place to put everything. So the notes from our steering committee meetings, the video from this session, probably a frequently asked questions document, probably an open all the time survey that is just, and maybe it's a thought exchange. It's the clearinghouse. We will use some of our typical methods that we're improving every day to be able to push that out more regularly. The board itself can expect that it'll be an agenda item at every single one of our meetings, so that you will get probably updates from myself and the board reps. Same with the community, the district newsletter going out. So those are little pieces, and communication is its own identified role that I would imagine a group of people will add to that for sure.
Looks like you have more, Tim.
I do have another
Oh,
question.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Related to communication for-
Yes.
But it was more related to the board's responsibility in this process and what it looks like to be an active participant in the process if you're not on the steering committee, but you are on the.
I will start, and then I don't know if our board reps, I envision that part of when we design, we have to think about the board as a group. That's actually, that's the entity that I had in my head when I said some groups are focus groups in and of themselves. The board is one of them. And what does that need to look like? And so, man, I don't know if others would add to that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I was in the board of the target group and this, information that I had written something about that. So these conversations are gonna inform other areas of board work, right? So we're gonna be a target group because the information, we're gonna have to synthesize that information in some different way too, right? We're not gonna be the ones writing the strategic planning, but it might inform other areas that we do need to work on.
Stephen, yeah.
I would just add too, we start designing things that are in the community, so the focus groups that we design or the community pieces that we would want board members to attend those as well.
Absolutely.
You know, so that you're hearing what we're hearing, on this committee. And I mean, I think that would be just one of the best things, just the visibility.
Just to follow up on Steve, or minutes can be taken at the community, so that's
Yep.
gonna be accessible information. to-
Yeah, exactly.
And the follow up on that is the information that the steering committee is considering, like the youth risk behavior survey, local common assessment, and the equity pulse check-in. Is that information be available to the community to respond to as well, or to incorporate in their thinking and prioritization of what they want for our students?
The answer is yes, and then I will ask Jeannie to expand a little bit on the equity pulse check in terms of what of that and how exactly what that data looks like and where it
And I'm just
goes.
using that as one of the sources. of data,
Exactly.
But so.
Yeah.
what
But
are
why are we at
The
that?
sources
Yeah,
of data that you're accessing
yeah,
for.
exactly.
Okay.
The equity pulse check data ends up looking like a spreadsheet with three colors really, like green, we're doing great, yellow, we're doing okay, and red, not so great, right? And then so that data will be available. And then the other piece is that it doesn't end there. The staff in your buildings are going to look at that data and process that data and identify strengths and areas for growth, and then prioritize those areas for growth. And it's important to me, it's important to my organization that we start with strengths, because you do have strengths, and because we know that people grow best when we identify and build on their strengths, just like our students grow best when we identify and build on their strengths. And so what the data will look like for each school is, here are strengths, here are areas for growth, here are the way we prioritize them. And you'll have access to all that data when it's completed.
Chris, that question also reminds me of another question that was brought up or discussion that the steering committee had. And it's related to data. It's not directly related to that question, but it's about accountability in general. So once the strategic plan is there and there are action steps, those action steps will have measurements associated with them, and the board moving forward would be receiving reports from me, frankly, and obviously through lots of different methods. You'll receive reports on the strategic planning goals. So that's more of a like after process, but it's related to the data. And the reason I bring it up is because the person who asked the question, it was a good question. It was, how do you make sure that this isn't just a shelf document that sits somewhere until the next 5 years when you have to do one? Like, how do you actually know it's being implemented? And that's pretty important and connected to work that we're trying to do anyway, which is be more fluid at using data. So your question made me think about that. And that's part of it. It is later, but it's baked into those action steps. What are the goals? What are the action steps, and how will we measure them moving forward?
Jeannie, I'm wondering if there's members of the community that are here to maybe have questions?
Or Zoom. If people are Zoom, we can see you. So if you
Yeah,
want to
we can
raise your
see you.
hand. Or some.
For
we can.
administrators, you know, I see a few of our principals here too, or
17.
Yeah.
Just a process question. I know that initially you envisioned this as a multi-year process, and now you're looking at, wrapping up by January. I mean, is there an addition to a sort of additional phase after that, or were there things that changed in terms of what the challenges you were looking at, and then you decide to speed things up?
That's a great question. And I would say a couple things. One, the reason for the accelerated timeline is to give us information as quickly as possible to be able to enter into budget conversations and where do we go in structural conversations. And so that's the abbreviated timeline. But I would also say at the same time, that this ends, like the development of the plan ends at the end of January. The measurement of it, the coming back to it, the how are we doing on it, that's the part that continues. So it's both accelerated and it's also launching us into a different phase. The other thing that I would say that is multi-year is if any system that's contemplating changes, whether it's implementation of strategic planning goals or bigger changes, they take multiple years. We want the information so that we can start making decisions that get us there, but these things take time, so. I appreciate that question though, because it's true. This is tight. We also know that, and so some of what we might learn is there's more engagement that has to happen even after this is over because of the compressed timeline.
Yeah, and I will add that the process is will inform and answer part of that question too, as we are, like, we'll know more.
Hard to hear you, Laura.
Oh, that the process will answer that question too, right? Like it will give us information of do we need to do more after, we don't know because we haven't started.
How often is the group meeting?
We'll decide on Friday. We put out at the end, we gave our steering committee a week to give us some feedback on dates and times that work for them. I suspect that we'll meet as a steering committee at least once a month, maybe more at the beginning. And then there will be subgroups that do various work like designing convenings or synthesizing data and drafting. And so then those subgroups will meet in addition to that at least monthly meeting.
And the subgroups are only members of the steering committee that are taking different tasks.
Yes. And they'll attend different convenings and gatherings, focus groups, et cetera, in order to gather that data and start using it. And so it'll be both probably one large group meeting a month and then additional meetings for different teams to work on different aspects. We're a large group at 16, so. Is that what you would have thought?
Yes, absolutely. So we did ping to see.
Yeah, because that can assume if there's any questions, but I don't see any hands or.
So if there, a couple things just to kind of wrap us up. This isn't the only opportunity to have questions. I'm sure that you will think of them later. When we put this out, we will be sort of capturing just this presentation part and putting it into a link so that it's viewable repeatedly. So with that, we'll have that on the website. We will again open up whether it's just a Google form for now or whether it's a different platform, just an ongoing place to collect questions. So if you think of something later, if the people listening think of something later, there will be a place to be able to capture that. And I want to thank Jeannie and also let her get on her way because she has to drive to Maine tonight.
Oh my gosh,
So,
you're on my way though. And I just want to thank you for the opportunity to work with this really great steering committee and in your district. It's, I'm really looking forward to it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you for being
Have a
here.
great evening, everyone.
Okay. So if there's not other questions, the board has some business after this. So if there's no other questions, I just want to thank the members of the public for being here in person and the ones that are remote too. Thank you for joining us and we're looking forward to continue to engage with you. And I forget something?
No, you did not, but I'm realizing that we do have one action item on personnel that we should take before we go into the executive.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we can do that after. Yeah. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Julie, for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, steering
Thank
committee
you.
members for
Steering
coming.
committee.
You can, yeah. Right, there you go.
Yeah.